Hello, Redor. Welcome to episode 3 of Walking with the Broken. As we said initially in the beginning of the series, that we wanted something to help us think through the categories of how to engage with the brokenness of this world, whether it be difficult people that we're dealing with or just brokenness and sickness and in inequality and joblessness and uncertainty that we're facing in the future. However, the place to start with this is to be confronted with our own brokenness. And that's what we've been dealing with in the first 2 episodes, to see how Jesus called not professional people, but people that were unqualified, and he called them in grace and called them to trust him. And even as Jesus was training these people, and specifically the 12 disciples, they had a front row seat to see God's grace in action through Jesus. But time and time again, they were failing, and yet Jesus was patient with them. He was rebuking them. He was reprimanding them. He was helping them grow into their calling. We're supposed to go on now into the next episodes to see how we should be interacting with the rest of the world. But I thought it was good for us to spend one more episode in seeing how Jesus was both engaging with the brokenness, but also encouraging his disciples to minister from that place of brokenness to the rest of the world. And for that, we're going to go to the end of the Gospel according to John, and we'll be looking at chapter 20. And I'm reading for us from verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." And he said to him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." He said to him, "Tend my sheep." And he said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep." Now it's interesting, as Jesus was deeply aware of what was happening in Peter's mind and in his heart, how Peter was most probably still coming to grips of the events of the last couple of days, and especially in his denial. And it's not by accident that Jesus then goes and asks him 3 times whether Peter loves him or not, mirroring the 3 times that Peter has denied him. Now, we don't think that Jesus did this to teach Peter a lesson that he should really love the Lord and he shouldn't deny him again and what he did was wrong. But what was interesting is that in his questioning Peter, Jesus was reminding Peter of the way that he failed, and then inviting Peter back into relationship by which Peter could respond, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And once that relationship, as they've been reconciled, Jesus then recommissions him for his ministry. And this is an interesting strategy, pushing into Peter's weakness to bring him closer and then commission him for ministry. We would think that the ideal strategy would be to simply build Peter up and to tell him, you're a great speaker and these are the things that you can do for me. Lean into your strengths, do the things that you know you do well, and you'll be a great pastor, you'll be a great minister worker, and you'll be effective for the kingdom of God. But this isn't the route that Jesus goes. We know that Jesus does things really differently. Rather, Jesus presses into the places where Peter has failed and where Peter is broken. And the reason for this is to display once again the grace of God, and that grace is the launch pad for Peter's ministry. Now, we're not the Apostle Peter, and Peter had a great ministry, and he had a great history of how the church was built on the confession that he had that Jesus is the Christ. But we likewise also have unique ministries. You have a unique situation that you've been called to. You've got unique relationships and unique setting that you're in, and you have a unique gift that God has given you for works of ministry. The question then is, how should we engage that ministry field? before we get to the other subjects of how Jesus engaged with the broken worlds, what is the place that we should launch from? Well, similar to Peter, what we should start relying on is not necessarily our place of strength, but as the place of weakness. It's recognizing that it's in our failures that the grace of God shines brightest. Now, what I'm not suggesting is that we simply go and show the world how weak we are, but it is being honest about who we are and by what we've been called to God, because it's in that the secret sweetness of the gospel really shines through, that God accepts without merit, and that he gives grace and mercy lavishly, or in a lavish way, and he asks us to be reconciled with him. And so when we think about the discipleship walk, as we reflect upon these sessions, we definitely want to know that we are called not because we're qualified. We want to know that we should grow as Christians together, and that means not hiding our brokenness from one another. But then particularly as we engage with ministry and with evangelism and with the world out there, the place where the Christian starts is not from a place of strength. It is a place of deep dependence on the grace of God. And so God even reminds us of those broken spaces that we come from, so that we don't fall into a trap of relying on our own strength, but continually what we should do in every sphere of life is reflect back on God. And so what that means for us practically, as you think about your ministry and as you think about your work and the relationships and the way that you study and do things, is that as you go through life, you are definitely going to make mistakes. And we spoke about this last week, how disciples should grow one another in this. But it also gives us an opportunity when we engage with those who aren't disciples, how we can be upfront with our mistakes and then point to the one that accepts us irrespective of our mistakes. But there's a second thing that it does. Not only do we show the grace of God, but it frees us up to own our mistakes in other areas of life, where we can ask forgiveness, where we can be the first ones to seek reconciliation with one another, where we bear the consequences of the sin that we have caused. All of this because we know that those aren't the things that define us. We have been defined by the one that called us back into relationship with him. And so the value that you have and the value that you can add to the ministry out there is solely caught up in the beauty of the resurrected Christ. Christian, you are called. Christian, you are being sanctified. But Christian, you are sent to minister to the world from a place of deep dependence on Christ.